Okay, we're live. Hi, Maureen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Alexandra.
Well, perhaps first we can just start off with a brief introduction. We'll start a bit before the hour, and you can let us know a bit about who you are and then also where you work.
Okay, so my name is Maureen Ravili and I work in a consulting company based in Paris, which is named Azao, and we are specialized in inclusive business strategies, so helping companies implementing projects which are both financially sustainable and with social impact. And so we do different things from strategy to market research and project implementation for these companies and organizations.
Excellent, wonderful. Excellent. And we, so to all that are watching and joining us live, thank you so much. And to all that are watching this afterwards, thank you as well. We thank you so much for sending in your questions. We've tried to work with them a bit to create a bit of a narrative through the interview. So we do hope that we're answering everything that you submitted. And if you have anything that we're not getting to, feel free to put it in the chat of the YouTube if you're watching this live, or feel free to send it to the Toilet Board Coalition. You can reach us at secretariat@toiletboard.org, and we will be sure that it finds its way to a Maureen and that you can get an answer through that. So without further ado, we will launch in. Maureen, first and foremost, why is it important to get to know your customers?
Well, I think that market research is absolutely key for any organizations in any context. And this is also more true when you operate in bottom of the pyramid markets, because we know that it can be very difficult to get insights on low-income consumers. Mm-hmm. How do they live? What do they like? What do they don't like? How do they behave in their households, in the community? What products do they purchase? And what do they expect from you as a company or social entrepreneur, etc. So many questions that are extremely important when you want to target these populations. And so I'm sure that some of you already know their consumer very well. So maybe you have been working with them for a long time. Maybe some of you have lived with them. You even know some of them personally. So some of you might already have plenty of information on them. Sometimes it can be difficult to step back a little bit and to structure all this data. What information is useful for me and my business? How do I structure the insights I get? How do I categorize my consumers? What does it mean for my strategy and for my marketing strategy? So this is really the purpose of market research.
Excellent. So is there a particular stage of business that I, as an entrepreneur, should really invest in consumer insights?
Yes, I think that the first one, the obvious one, is when you design your product or your service. If you want to design the right product for your consumer, obviously you have to understand his needs and expectations to make sure to design a good product. And then I would say that the second stage where market research is very useful, and maybe it's the most important one, is marketing. Designing the good product is not enough. What matters is to convince people to buy or to use it afterwards. And unfortunately, many companies or social entrepreneurs tend to forget the importance of marketing in low-income communities. Most of the time, just design products that respond to social needs. So for instance, fortified food, water purifiers, solar lamps, toilets. And because these products respond to basic needs, they think that everyone will obviously want to buy them without having to provide any marketing effort. But the fact is, reality is much more complex. And in most cases, people don't perceive the value of such products and are not willing to pay for them. So it means that you, as a social entrepreneur, you have to conduct marketing campaigns in order to convince them to change their behaviors and to adopt your products. And one typical example that we can mention here is, for instance, sanitation in India. With the Swachh Bharat policy, the government is currently equipping the country with millions of toilets. But the fact is that these toilets are not used today because in reality, the issue is not so much about the availability of the equipment, but about behavior change and marketing. So it shows the importance of market research and of marketing, I think.
Right, absolutely. So sometimes we hear that a low-income consumer is a basic consumer, or much simpler to understand than a premium consumer, for instance. Do you think this is true?
No, I don't. I think actually that low-income consumers are probably the most difficult to understand customers in the world. And the main reason for that is that today we lack data and statistics on BOP consumers. We just don't have any quantitative surveys or data or statistics that explain their habits, their tastes, their purchasing habits. And so it's very, very difficult for people to have reliable and valid data on BOP consumers. And so as a consequence, I think that today low-income consumers are suffering from many stereotypes and myths.
Absolutely. Okay. And so what, can you maybe explain a little bit or elaborate what some of those stereotypes or myths are?
Yeah, for instance, I think that for now, many people are thinking that low-income consumers are just willing to survive. And because they don't have much money, they just live with a few dollars per day, then they would be only attracted by non-essential products. But the fact is, most of them are also willing to buy aspirational products that give them a certain social status. For instance, a TV, for instance, branded products. Low-income consumers want to have access to such products. And the typical example we can have is the mobile phone. Even if we cannot consider the mobile phone as a survival item, still everyone has one today, even in the poorest areas. And maybe another stereotype that we have on low-income consumers is that most of the time we think that they are only driven by price and that they are not loyal to brands. And I think this is false, because what we observe is that most of the time low-income consumers tend to be very loyal to products that offer the best value in terms of quality and price. And also they are very loyal to brands, because for them, brands, and especially the international ones, are representing a guarantee of quality. So for instance, if you go to some countries in Africa, you would observe that international brands such as Nescafé, Maggi, or Lipton, they are everywhere, especially in low-income households, even if they are more expensive than local brands. And in the sanitation sector, we also have this example. So for instance, if we take the Sani Shop example in Cambodia, so this is a social entrepreneur, and we observe that 80% of their customers would rather purchase a $90 latrine with a solid sink and cement cubicle rather than a 45, so less expensive latrine with an effective but modest bamboo shelter. So it shows that low-income consumers are really risk-averse and they prefer to buy risk-free solutions, even if they have to pay a little bit more for them, rather than cheap products that might be a bit risky for them.
Excellent. Very interesting. So then how do we get this better understanding of low-income consumers? What do you recommend in terms of market research techniques?
Well, I think I will start with one pitfall that has to be avoided, which is to try to apply traditional market research methodologies to low-income consumers. In most cases, when you go on the field, you observe that big companies and market research agencies are just replicating what they are used to do in premium markets to understand low-income consumers. So they just send marketing experts from the US or from Europe on the field with a long questionnaire with notebooks, or they will conduct, I don't know, maybe focus groups in fancy interview rooms. And obviously you cannot get valid consumer insights with these sophisticated techniques with low-income consumers, because they are very intimidating, they can be very intrusive for respondents, and obviously in some cases, if respondents are too intimidated, then they won't give you the right answer, and so you don't have any precious insights. So I think that one of the most important things that you have to keep in mind is for low-income consumers, you have to have dedicated alternative market research strategies.
Okay, so what do we do then? What do you recommend, if not the traditional ways?
Well, I think that I could maybe summarize this by stressing 5 key principles that should be kept in mind when studying low-income consumer. The first one is to spend time with your respondents, because actually market research is about trust, and so to build trust, you have to spend time there with your respondent, with your community, in order to understand and to feel and to observe what's going on. And so contrary to traditional market research techniques, which invite to question first and then to listen, here we suggest to do the opposite. It means that first you observe what's going on, then you listen, and finally you will question. And so the idea is really just to go on the field and look at what's going on. And so you can do it very informally. So you just go there, you spend time in the community, you discuss with people, you meet with key opinion leaders, you just sit in the street or in the public toilet, for instance, and you just observe what is happening. And what we like to do also in this stage is what we call participatory observation. And so the idea is to select 3 to 4 households and to spend the entire day with them. So you will have the chance to enter into their intimacy and to step into their shoes. So basically go there in their house and you do everything they do. So you cook with them, you go to the grocery store with them, you go to the public toilet with them, you take care of the children with them. So you do everything with them. And I think that this is a good way to really understand their constraints, their lifestyle, and their intimate habits. And this way you can get insights that no one could get with a simple questionnaire. So this would be my first advice, to spend time with them and to observe and to participate in their daily life. Second principle, I think, would be to go beyond your topic, because when you want to understand your consumers, it's important to have a comprehensive approach. You cannot just focus on sanitation, you have to look at the big picture. And so I think that what is interesting is to ask questions and to collect information on issues that might seem to be far from your business and from the sanitation issue. For instance, you can ask questions about the lifestyle, about the budget, about the way people are interacting with each other, about their purchasing behaviors, about cultural taboos, religious taboos, many, many different issues. And I think that asking all these questions will help you to have the big picture and to really understand the broader context in which your consumers are living in. Then I would say that the third principle would be to mix some individual with collective moments. So I recommend to start with individual interviews first, and then to pursue with focus groups with maybe 5 to 7 people with different profiles. So it can be men, women, young people, old people, rich, poor, very different profiles. And I think that these collective interviews can be very interesting because they will help you to make people react, to confront opinions, and to generate what we can call productive friction. And along with these collective moments, you can also, if you want, organize some collaborative exercises or workshops that are inspired by anthropology. So for instance, you can ask people together and to collectively produce a map of the community with key places associated with health and sanitation, for instance. Or you can also organize role plays between consumers or make them interact with card games or ask them to take pictures within the community. So like very participatory exercises. And I think that such outputs can be very useful because they will help you to raise awareness in the community and to have the chance to discuss about sensitive issues. Then fourth principle, I would recommend you to try, if you can, to mix a qualitative with a quantitative step. So I would recommend to start with a qualitative study. During this study, you can conduct the individual interviews or the focus groups we have been talking about. And this phase will help you to really discover the issue, so to analyze your consumers' behaviors, their perceptions, to identify the main categories of consumers, and to understand the broader context of your community. Then, when you have collected these first qualitative insights, you can go with a quantitative survey. And so here, the idea would be to build a questionnaire that you will administer to maybe 200 or 400 people, for instance. And this quantitative survey will help you to cross-check the findings that you got during the qualitative phase. And the most important part here is to build a good questionnaire for the quantitative survey. And so to do that, you can build upon your qualitative phase that will help you to identify the good questions. And what you should keep in mind is to really try to be short in your quantitative survey, so maybe 20 to 30 minutes, to go straight to the point and to have a limited set of options for each question in order to facilitate the treatment afterwards.
Okay.
And then finally, very, very important, even if it comes last, I think that what is really important is to identify the good research team when you do market research. So obviously you should have local people in your team. So it means people from the community who speak the same language as respondents, who understand their constraints and their realities. It will be very helpful for you. But at the same time, we also recommend to have outsiders with you, meaning people coming from other communities or even foreigners. And actually, in some cases, I think that it can be useful to have white people, for instance, in your team, because they can have an external viewpoint, so they can challenge your own belief. And contrary to you, these people, they haven't worked on the project for many months or years. They don't have any preconceived idea on your project. And so they can see things that you don't see anymore, and they can bring new ideas. And last but not least, an outsider has a big advantage because he always has the excuse to ask naive questions to respondents and talk about cultural taboos that you don't dare to discuss with them. So for instance, when I go in the field, I can always say, sorry, I'm French. I don't know anything about your local context. Can you please explain how it works? And it's always a good excuse to speak about cultural taboos. So I think that outsiders can be particularly important, especially in the qualitative phase, to understand the general perspective. So this would be my 5 recommendations. So first, to spend time in the community. Second, to go beyond your topic and have a comprehensive approach. Third, to try to mix individual with collective moments. Fourth, to mix qualitative with quantitative steps. And 5, identify the good research team.
That's fabulous. So then my next question is, I have all of this data. What do I do with it? How do I make sense of it and really use it to help shape my business in an effective way?
This is a good question, excellent one actually, because indeed the big challenge with market research is not only to collect the data, but to make it useful and helpful for your business. And so once you have collected all this information on your consumers, what you should do, I think, is to categorize your consumers and design a clear segmentations. So you have to segment your consumers based on different criteria that you have to define depending on your business activity. So it can be on the age, on their gender, the level of revenue, their education awareness level on sanitation or hygiene issues. And so then for each of these category of consumers, you have to define the good strategy. Are they already buying or using your products? Could they be interested in your products? What could be the arguments to convince them? What would be the best way to reach them? So really try to define the good strategy for each segment of consumers. And then finally, obviously, you have to design your action plan. You cannot address all the consumers at the same time, so you have to prioritize, and so to define which category of consumers you would target first. So I think it's important to have this rollout strategy.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so we have one more question. So if we will be happy to take another question, if someone wants to type something into the chat box on YouTube, you're more than welcome to. I will see it there, and we will work to see if Maureen can answer it now. But one last question, and then of course I'll have a final thought at the end for you. But a lot of entrepreneurs that we work with in our network are very engaged in their communities. Sometimes, you know, they've grown up there, or they've lived there, or they have very personal relationships with a lot of their customers. I would imagine that scenario, you have almost too much information. There's so much there. How do you have any recommendations of how those entrepreneurs could kind of take a step back almost to then categorize that information or figure out where they're missing information and what they might need to look for?
Yeah, I know that sometimes it can be very difficult and tricky for those of you who are very close from their consumers and beneficiaries, because you live there, you know them very well, and so you have the feeling that you already have all the information and that you do not need to do any market research studies. But yet, I think it's very important to step back and to process everything that you know and to formalize everything that you have. And so to help you in this process, I think that it can be very useful to ask outsiders, meaning people who are not familiar with the project, who are not living in the community, to come and to help you processing the information. Because they, as outsiders, they can help you to step back, to focus on the right information, and to prioritize all the data you have. And I think in this perspective, it can be useful to have people coming from the business world, because they can bring maybe a business perspective in your project, because I know that sometimes social entrepreneurs, and it's absolutely normal, and actually it's your strength, are focusing on the social part of their project, and sometimes we tend to forget a little bit about the business perspective. And so I think that in this way, it can be useful to have a business people coming in and trying to help you in focusing on the right information and challenge you in your activity. But finally, I just want to also add that do not forget that for you, it's a big strength to be part of the community and to have access to so much information. You are very, very lucky to live with your consumers and to know them and to spend time with them. And I know for sure that many social entrepreneurs and many companies would love to have access to such precious information. So you are very lucky to have all this information. You just have now to maybe step back a little bit and to process it in order to make it useful for your business and for your activity.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Maureen. Do you have any last thoughts, any final recommendations you want to share?
Yeah, maybe I would say that do not forget about market research. I think it's quite clear, but it is really important. And even if it takes time, even if it can cost money, even if sometimes it can appear to be pointless, you have to remember that market research and getting consumer insight is really key for your activity. No organization, big or small, can afford to skip this step. So really take time to understand your consumers. And if you already have information on them, take time to step back and to process all the information you have in order to have clear recommendation for your business. And maybe one last advice is just do not forget about marketing. As I said in the beginning, I think that designing the good product is not enough today. You also have to market your product. And so it means that you have to make a difference between what consumers want versus what you think they need. And some companies and social entrepreneurs have failed to reach their targets because they didn't pay attention at marketing. And in some cases, some of them have tried to launch what we can call pro-poor marketing campaigns, explicitly targeting poor consumers and only focusing on the social value of their products. But let's not forget that poor consumers are just as any other consumers. They don't want to be considered as poor, and they want to have access to aspirational products. So you, as a social entrepreneur, you have to find the good marketing tools and the good marketing levers and arguments to reach them efficiently and to offer them with products that respond to their aspirations.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Maureen, for taking the time with us today.
Thank you.
To those watching, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at secretariat@toiletboard.org, and we will collect your questions and communicate them with Maureen and get you answers. So again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having more for you in May. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.